Hi, welcome to part 5 of 5 in our Next Level Social Media Marketing course. I'm Eric Papson and I'll be facilitating this section for you. And in this section we're going to be talking about tracking in Google Analytics. And some of the documents we presented in a training session were kind of cheat sheets in walking you step by step through the procedures of setting up a Google Analytics 4 account. Now remember, this was recorded in late May of 2023. At that point, Universal Google Analytics or GA3 was sunsetting as a product, and a new version called GA4 was coming out. So it's really important when you're listening to this that you want to make sure you're setting up what they call a GA4 or the latest version of Google Analytics for your website. So if you're still on, if you've already set up Google Analytics a couple years ago, and you may think you think you're on Universal Analytics or GA3, it's very important that you kind of reset it up. I mean, you can't just kind of like, it's not like you're kind of updating a piece of software. You literally have to reconfigure GA4 for your website. So if you have an old installation, you have to start from scratch to do a whole new installation of GA4. You can find out a lot of information about how to do that on the web. And again, we have a cheat sheet that walks you step by step. At least, in May of 2023, these things are constantly changing. So if you listen to this, let's say later in the year or next year, things may have changed dramatically. But know there's a lot of resources on the web, including Google. Google's probably the best resource for this to kind of understand how to set these things up. But let's talk about where we are today in May of 2023 and how you can utilize Google Analytics. So let's start by talking about how Google Analytics works. And we're going to just use a crude example here of a grocery store. And let's assume that this grocery store, it really cares about understanding all of the behaviors of its shoppers. And so imagine if this grocery store installed a bunch of cameras all in every aisle of the grocery store, and they watched the behavior of the shoppers. If a shopper picked up a bottle of shampoo, they would register that. If that shopper then put the shampoo in their cart, they would register that. If that shopper bought the bottle of shampoo, it would register that. Etc., etc. And then imagine if when those shoppers came in, they literally were given, a lanyard with an ID on it that could be scanned. And if they then left the store and came back 3 days later and did some more shopping, the grocery store would be able to connect those two shopping experiences to the same shopper. And then at the end of all this, imagine if there was, someone analyzing all of these consumer behaviors and drawing insights from them. Okay, what are the most popular products? What did people touch and look at, but ultimately not put in their shopping cart? What did people put in their shopping cart, but then ultimately take out before they reached the register, etc., etc. That's kind of what Google Analytics is doing on your website. So now let's dig a little deeper. So you may be asking yourself, so how does Google know these things? Like for instance, if a user is coming from your website from somewhere else, how would Google Analytics know that? And the answer is, it may not know that. It tries to guess based upon what it knows, but we can make that more precise by making sure that we include what we call parameters inside any of the URLs we share. So for instance, if you're going to create a post on Facebook and you're going to link that back to your website, you'd want to know when people came to your website that they were coming from your Facebook post. So we can use these parameters in the URL itself to define where this traffic is coming from. And so there's really, two main parameters that you really should use, and the rest of them are kind of optional. But the two I'm going to key in here are source and medium. And you can see the parameters are everything that's after that question mark. So you have your regular URL, whatever your website is, and then after the slash, you're going to include that question mark, UTM_source, all lowercase, equals, and that's the value. So you have a variable and a value. And these values can then say things like UTM source, let's say, equals Facebook. And the medium is equal to what type of a source is it, and that would be here would be social media. So these are, you can use any values you want, but the important things to know that you should always use lowercase because this is all case sensitive. So as a rule of thumb, you're going to always use lowercase. You're going to define things in a consistent manner. So if let's say that you call your medium social media, all one word, or social -media, I want you to be consistent with that. Every time you tag something around social media. So for instance, Facebook and Pinterest, those are the same media, which is social media. So your values for those parameters would be consistent. That way, when you look at your reporting, it's going to aggregate nicely instead of a jumble of all of the different types of values that you've given it. So you're just going to use good hygiene here as you label things. But again, you want to use this where you're doing any kind of paid media or you're doing any kind of organic media posting that's outside of your website, and you want to make sure that you can record where those people are coming into your website from. So a big thing to kind of understand about website analytics is what it can answer and what it can't. So website analytics is really good in telling us the what, the where, and the when. But it's not very good at answering why, because why requires the context. So you can know that a user came from Facebook, and you can know that they came to your website on Tuesday, and you can know what page on your website they came to, but it's not going to tell you why they did that. So when you look at Google Analytics, know that you're only getting part of the story, and you'll have to kind of have some hypotheses around what might be happening, or figure out creative ways to try to get at that answer. But just know that the limitations of Google Analytics are this. So when you're setting up Google Analytics, you want to really think about what your business goals are and your website goals and define that as much as possible. Because if you do that, if you take this kind of a matrix and you do it for yourself, you say, okay, let's talk about our business goals. Well, if you are a restaurant, your business goal is to bring people into the restaurant. And when you bring people into the restaurant, your business goal might be that you want them to, get as much food as possible, or to maybe come back a second time. So those might be your business goals, but then you have to think about, okay, how's the website play into those goals? Well, you might say, hey, if I can get people when they come to the restaurant to give me an email, or when they come to my website to give me an email, if I collect these emails, then I can send them promotions to draw them back into the website. So you might be using, let's say, your website to convert. We call this conversion in marketing. You're getting people to do something in exchange for some value. So here you're saying, listen, if you give me your email address on the website, I'm going to promise to send you some updates and some promotions. And so now I'm willing to give you my email address. We call that a conversion because you converted the person into coming into the website and doing nothing to coming to the website and doing something that's meaningful to both the customer and to you. So you can think about all of the things your website could do for you and start thinking about what are your website goals. Then if you say, okay, these are my goals, like I want to acquire email addresses, then you start to put, some meat on that goal. And so, it might be that, you start thinking about how to quantify that. So we're getting more and more granular, more and more kind of defined in our goals. And by doing that, we now have a very clear understanding of what we want Google Analytics to measure for us. Couple things to just kind of point out. We can't boil the ocean here around Google Analytics. It's just too big of a topic to cover in the short time that we have in this section. But a couple things to realize is if you use Universal Analytics in the past, which was GA4, one of the big differences is that if you use GA3 and you're moving to GA4, one of the big differences is that GA4 has the ability to combine traffic from a website and your app. If you have an app, it can kind of pull that in. If you have multiple websites, it can combine those. So it has the ability to have multiple properties, and for you to combine those into one database of information. So that's one of the big differences. And the other big difference is that there's a lot more focus on what we call session events. And session events are essentially things that happen on a website that can be recorded. And when those are recorded, they have parameters, or that's a fancy way of saying a value. There's some value assigned to that event. And this is how, in a very technical manner, this is kind of how GA4 operates, is that it measures various events, various behaviors on a website, and gives them a value. So for instance, let's say that a user scrolling your website. The scrolling is an event. And then the parameter would be the percentage of scroll, for instance. So let's say that someone didn't scroll at all. That would be no scroll. If, say, someone started to scroll and they scrolled to 50% of the page length, that parameter would be 50%. So here you can start to understand how one event can have various different values or parameters associated with it. And this is a way to measure things that are happening on the website. Now, as you follow our setup guide that it's in the course, here's a couple things to keep in mind. So once you get your property set up, one of the first things that you want to do is set the data retention for the data that you're going to be ingesting into your Google Analytics account. The way to do that is define the admin tab in navigation, then click on Account Access Management, then click on Data Streams, and then click on Data Retention. And when you do that, you're going to go to the next slide. So here we are on the Data Retention field within Google Analytics 4. And here the default is 2 months. So what this means is that Google's only going to retain some of the cookie associated data associated with your users for only 2 months. And this is kind of around privacy. So if your business is allowed to retain information about a user for longer than 2 months, which most local businesses will be able to do this, there's obviously a number of exceptions. Think about folks like in the healthcare space that are going to be you're going to have some restrictions around user identified information or advertising identification. So either you have to make sure that you can comply with this with your local laws or guidelines for your businesses. So Google kind of starts you out with a conservative retention strategy, which is only 2 months. But most of us are going to want a little bit more user data. So if you're able if your business is allowed to kind of look at the insights for longer than 2 months, and I would suggest that you select 14 months here and save. Now you're going to have the ability to track that user over a longer period of time, which is going to help you get more insights about that particular user. Now know that when when Google Analytics is tracking your users, it's not tracking any particular person. I want to make this absolutely clear. It is really looking, it assigns a ID associated with that person, but it doesn't know who the person is, and you're not going to know who the person is. You're not going to have any personal identifiable information, nor should you ever attempt to collect personal identificational information unless you have the user's consent to do so. So Google Analytics will not collect any personally identifiable information. And so know that when you collect this user data, you're kind of collecting it in an anonymous fashion. So let's take a look at a couple more things that we can configure here that I would recommend you do in your account. You don't want to track your own activity on your website, because if you're on your website a lot, or you have people working for you that are on your website a lot, you may over-exaggerate your numbers. So a way to filter that out is to go into settings and find the field that says define internal traffic. You want to click on that. You're then going to see these next screens that you just follow the arrows here. It says configure your tag settings. And when you get into the configuration, you can filter that configuration to filter out your own IP address. And so what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, I don't want Google Analytics, I don't want you to measure my behavior on the website or any of my employees or any of the agencies or people that work for me. And so I'm going to kind of create this list to filter those folks out. So if you ever want to know what your IP address is from whatever computer you're using, you can just go into Google and type in what's my IP, and it will magically tell you what your IP address is, and then you can simply add that as a value to filter out. And so again, if you ever want to, you need more detailed instruction on how to do this, because this might constantly be evolving within the Google Analytics 4 platform, you can always Google how to look for a YouTube video or look for some information to Google and how to do this. But I want to just make you aware that this is an important step to do to make sure that you're not tracking traffic that really isn't your customers. So we talked about events a moment ago, so I want to just spend a little bit more time on the various events that Google Analytics can track. So first of all, I want you to think of this as a pyramid, as you see here in the slide. There's this kind of foundational information that it collects for every account. That's automatically corrected. That means if you set up Google Analytics 4 for your website, it's going to automatically collect certain data. The enhanced measurements is something you must enable. If you don't enable it, and by default it is not enabled, then you're going to miss out on tracking this data. The third one is recommended. These are things that you need to configure in addition to the standard setup of Google Analytics. But Google is recommending that when you set them up, you use these particular events to measure the thing you want to measure. You'll understand this a bit more as we get deeper into this. And then lastly is custom. Custom means custom. This is something you create, or your web developer or your analytics specialist creates, and is completely custom for your website. So you can track a number, really you can get very creative here and track all kind of things in Google Analytics, as long as you know how to customize the configuration to do so. And so this is certainly a more advanced area, but just know that you don't have to just kind of use the metrics that are off the shelf, so to speak, with Google Analytics 4. If you have the right partner to help you with that really understands Google Analytics and understands Google Tag Manager, they can really be a wizard around some of the things that you could track. Now, the enhanced measurements, like I said, by default is off in Google Analytics 4, and we highly recommend that you consider turning it on, enabling this feature, because when you do, you unlock some really cool additional insights that you wouldn't normally get. Things like, how when people scroll on your website, is that recorded? Or when people click on a link that goes from your website to another website. Or if you have an internal site search element or feature on your website, you can record what people are doing, are searching for on your website. If you have videos or you have forms on your website or you have downloads on your websites, all of these things are covered in what we call advanced, or what Google Analytics calls advanced measurements. And here you need to go into your data stream settings. This is an admin data streams, and you go find the events or web stream details, forgive me, and then you look for advanced measurement. And here you want to just click all of these on. That will allow you to click on and click save. And now you have given yourself that second layer of analytics. Now into recommended events. These are things that are not configured by default, and your analytics person will need to configure them, but there are a number of things. Some of these things relate to e-commerce. So if you have an e-commerce site, you want to pay particular attention to this list of recommended events. But what I suggest you do is go to the website listed here on this slide, look at all of the various recommended events, and see if any of those are relevant for your website or for your business. And if they are, you want to find an analytics expert or partner to help you implement them. Now let's talk about some of the standard reports. These are the reports that are kind of just off the shelf with all implementations of Google Analytics. You have the ability to look at users. Now, users are the people that come to your site and may, do some things, and then later may come again. So a user is someone who is cookied by the browser, and that person is now assigned an ID number within Google Analytics, and if they come back, Google will recognize them. And so, whether they come one time or come 10 times, we're going to record them as one user. And here you can see all of the different channels, marketing channels that you use, like, paid search or organic social, etc. You can kind of see where your traffic is coming from. And the standard reports will tell you how many sessions in total you had from these users. What was the sessions per user? So here it's 1.21 for this particular brand. What that means is that on average, each user came back 1.2 times. So a lot of people came once, and some people came several times, and the average ended up to be 1.2. You can also see the average duration. Here you see the average duration for this particular brand was 2 minutes and 1 second. What's interesting about that is you can then break that down from the different sources that they came from. So for instance, we see here that people that came directly to our website stayed for 3 minutes and 29 seconds versus people that came from a paid social ad. So if we ran an ad, let's say on Facebook, and this is, you can see it there, it is from Facebook, they only stayed for 32 seconds. So what does this tell us? The insight here would be that people that go to our website directly, they're not coming from any other place, they go to our website directly, they're more likely for this particular brand to stay longer than if they were to just click on a paid Facebook ad and come to our website. So you may think to yourself, well, gosh, 32 seconds versus 3 minutes. What can I do in my Facebook post, or what can I do on my website to get people to engage a little longer? Now you have a benchmark to work from. If 3 minutes is kind of the gold standard because that's the most you've been able to get in different traffic sources, you can now kind of determine how the other sources are doing for you and start to experiment a bit. Another thing that's interesting here is the engagement rate. Engagement in Google Analytics 4 is defined by people who stay for at least a certain amount of time. I think the default is 10 seconds, and you can change that in the setting for up to a minute. And it also is not only do they stay for at least 10 seconds, but they're interacting with the website. They're going to more than one page, or they're triggering a meaningful event that shows that they're not just kind of coming to the website, looking around, and leaving. This used to be called the bounce rate. In Universal GA, they called this a bounce rate, which had a completely different definition. The engagement rate is actually a better, more accurate definition, because there's a number of different things that can determine engagement. It can be the time that they're on the site. It can be that they viewed a couple pages. It could be that they did some event that was recorded that was meaningful. And so by looking at this, you get a general, at least some direction as to when people come to your website from various places, what is the comparative engagement rate? So for instance, we look here, I see that next door in Page Social, I had an engagement rate of only 12.5%. Let's compare that to the 59.96% that came from Bing in row 6. So we're comparing row 6 to row 7. You can see that Nextdoor didn't have a very high engagement rate. So remember, we said Google Analytics can tell you the what, but they can't tell you the why. So here we know that the engagement rate is better in paid search using Bing advertising than we are in Nextdoor. That Nextdoor is underperforming, so to speak, but we don't know why. Now look at the average engagement time. People are coming only for 6 seconds. So here is a good place to kind of think about as a marketer, hey, what is going on here? Is clearly the people from Nextdoor don't find my website to be relevant. They clicked on a link, they came to my website, and then they soon left. And they didn't do anything. And that might mean that the quality of advertising you're doing on Nextdoor is not right. It might be that people were expecting something else than what they got. And so when they got there, they were frustrated and said, this isn't for me. But you have to kind of think that through. Again, get into the shoes of the consumer and try to empathize with what might be going through their mind. Hey, consider even talking to your customers. And when you, let's say that people come into your business and you ask them, how'd you hear about us? If someone says Nextdoor, you can say, well, what did you think about, did you see, when you saw us, or what did you think about our advertisement? Or what did you think about, our content that was on Nextdoor? Why did you click? Why did you decide to come in? So these are all of the things that you can do to kind of get more understanding of why people are doing what they're doing. But Google Analytics really does do a nice job of generating the questions. This next report, called the Traffic Acquisition Report for Sessions, is pretty much the same report, but now we're looking at each individual session. We're not thinking about users and multiple sessions. We're talking about all of the sessions, regardless of how many users came from them. So this is a good idea to just get a general sense for the traffic, all of the different times people are coming to your website and what happens there. And again, same metrics, so we won't go into this, but just know that the difference between users are looking at the cookied user, irrelevant of how many sessions they came, just looking at that user behavior. And here we're looking at the traffic behavior, regardless, if it was one user or many users. It's just counting each session in its individual way and aggregating those in this report. The next report we're going to look at is the Pages and Screens report, again, part of the standard reporting package. And this is a good report for understanding what pages on your website, how each of those is performing. So if we think about, let's say you got 100 different pages on your website, and the question is, well, which ones are doing the quote the best? Which one are getting the most traffic? Which ones are getting the most engagement? Which ones are getting the most conversions? This report helps you understand that. And so here we can see that, the appointment page on row 1 is getting the most views, which is really good news because this particular company, their goal is to generate appointments. So if you get to the appointment page and you spend 3 minutes and 13 seconds there, then you're doing pretty well. And so this is kind of a way to decide what content you have or what pages on your website are performing best, which ones are performing worst, and then you can start asking yourself the question why. Why is this page perhaps doing better and these other pages doing worse? And what can I do perhaps to help the pages that are underperforming and learn from the pages that are overperforming? Google Analytics 4 also provides a way to do what they call explorations. And this is where you build your own report. So in the next slide, we're going to be taking a look at that. In explorations, you have several different options of templates that you can choose. We're going to look at just one of those templates, which is the funnel exploration. This is probably one of the most insightful reports for any business that has a funnel on your website. Now, what is a funnel? A funnel means that you want the user to do step 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. to get to an ultimate kind of outcome. So for instance, let's say it's an email sign up. You need people to go to the page where you have the email sign up form. You need them then to fill up the form. You need them to then submit the form, right? So there you have 3 steps. You have to go to the page where the form is, you have to complete the form, and then ultimately you have to submit the form. And so every website, or not, I shouldn't say every, but most websites have some type of a funnel if you think creatively. E-commerce websites have the most obvious funnel, right? You go to a product page, you grab a particular product, you look at that product, you put that product in your shopping cart, you then go to your checkout in your shopping cart, you ultimately then put in your payment information and your address information and you submit. So there's a pretty long funnel actually. It might have 5, 6, 7 steps associated with it before there's a desired outcome. So what a funnel exploration report does is it looks at each of those steps and measures the abandonment rate in each of those steps, essentially the fallout. So if someone starts in step 1 but they don't go to step 2, then there is a abandonment or fallout that happens between the two. This is an excellent report for understanding where the friction or difficulties lie in a funnel. So for instance, if people get to your form where you're collecting their address and let's say their email address, and they abandon that part of the step and they don't submit the information, perhaps there's a technical problem with the form. Perhaps when they put in their email address, it doesn't accept their email address, and they try a second time and it doesn't accept it, and they get frustrated and they leave. Perhaps you can even think of an experience you've had on a website where you were trying to do something, but it just wouldn't let you do it, and you finally said, well, I'm not trying anymore, and you just left, and you never finished what you wanted to do. Well, there's an example of if you had good analytics reporting, you could identify that as a business owner and you could take action to fix that problem. You may also find that people are just, as they get deeper into a funnel process, people tend to at some point drop out. That might be that you're asking for too much information. Perhaps I want you to ask yourself, do I really need every bit of this information I'm collecting in a form? If I can just get the bare minimum, would I be able to have a higher conversion rate? These are the things that you should experiment with, because ultimately what you want to do is to create a relatively painless process for people to do business with you. And a funnel analysis like this will help you do that. So now let's talk about, as a small, medium business, especially a local business, how can you act on this data? Well, there's audience insights in Google, and what this does is it will tell you demographic information on an aggregate about your users. For instance, do they identify as male or female? What are their interests that they have, and it will give you a high level understanding of the different interests that your aggregate user group may have. What are the various behaviors they have on your website? So these are all under an audience insights, but think of it as just a very high level demographic analysis of the people. It even give you things like some, like the age, which is the average age. So there's some of the things that you can find in the audience insights report. Traffic sources. These are the channels, and when we say channels in marketing, that means the various places where people will come to from your websites. It'll give you an understanding of that, and we actually covered that in previous slides. Number 3, content performance. We covered this already, which pages and which piece of the content are doing better. User behavior. Here are all those events that we talked about. You can even do things like start to understand some of the navigational patterns on the site. So in marketing we call this a consumer journey, but how people are going from one page to the next page to the next page. There's insights within various reports in Google Analytics that'll let you get to that as well. Conversion tracking. This is probably one of the most important things that Google Analytics does. And what we're doing here is we're defining various events as conversions. So these are special events. They're saying these are events we really, really care about. Let's say like an email sign up or an e-commerce purchase. Here we're tracking those things and giving them, assigning them a label so that we can see, how we're doing over time. This should tie nicely into your KPIs and business goals. And then local insights for local location-based businesses. GA4 can provide geographical data on websites visitors, enabling your business to focus their marketing efforts on specific regions, cities, neighborhoods where their target audience resides. So those are just some of the insights that you can get from GA4. It's probably, I would say in small businesses, just underutilized. Google Analytics is just this intimidating tool, but it doesn't have to be. We highly recommend that you spend some time getting to learn this more deeply. There's tons of information available on the web. There are literally hundreds of YouTube videos devoted to this. There's hundreds of web pages that are very well written and very easy to follow that will help you kind of figure out more and more things. So we've given you a step-by-step guide to how to implement it. I've given you some tips here on how to utilize it, but you're going to have to kind of take the next step and just get your hands dirty and be willing to kind of learn and explore and figure this out. Because the more you can kind of understand how to use a tool like this, which is free by the way, the more insights you're going to have on your audience, how they use your website, and how you can make it better. And then lastly, I want to kind of talk about this almost kind of a philosophy that we would urge you to embrace, which is a test and learn philosophy. That is that now that we have analytics and we can measure things and we have goals and we know what we're trying to work towards, we have this opportunity to try all kinds of things to see what works and what doesn't work. And I want you to really play with this. Go out and, don't be intimidated by all of the various, platforms like Facebook or Pinterest or LinkedIn or TikTok. Be willing to create something, put it out there, but put the right tracking on it so that you can measure it. So we're going to use those UTM parameters we talked about earlier. So when people link from another platform to your website, we know where they came from. You can assign a UTM parameter for even the particular piece of creative. Let's say that you could say, your introductory TikTok video. You could label it as such. So now when people come from that particular video and come to your website, you're going to know that they saw that piece of content. That way you can say, okay, this one worked better than this other piece of content. Now let's do more of the one that worked and less of the one that didn't work. So this is a way to get to learn your audience and learn what is working for them and what is not. And then also understand once that audience comes to your website, what are they doing? And you can parse out those insights within Google Analytics. So again, the reason why you install Google Analytics and the reason why you want to spend all this time configuring it is that you ultimately want to put yourself in a position to experiment with various marketing, whether it is organic marketing, which is free, like doing Facebook posts, or paid media, which is going to cost you some money, like buying keywords in Google search. It's a way for you now to try those things and figure out what's going to work for you. And by doing that, you can now become much more efficient and effective with your marketing budget and your time. So let's put it all together now. Here's what we're recommending. Spend time getting your local listing in Google and other directories. If you're a local business, this is the most important thing you can do. It doesn't cost you any money, and it will immediately increase your visibility. Get your Google business profile listing as complete and accurate as you can. Post on it. Provide Q&A. There's so many things. When you get into this platform and you start to see all the options, you'll see that there's a lot there, and there's constantly new things being added. So spend some time with this and make sure that you have the most complete Google business profile you can, and then take the time to share your address and phone number to other directories and publish that like we talked about earlier. Number 2, engage with your customers and provide valuable content. Right? I mean, your business is relevant for the people who care about what you do, and you need to help them care about it by telling your story and providing more information, or doing more explanation, or sharing more of your insights and wisdom. Just be yourself, give your personality a business, and make sure that your content reflects all of that. Number 3, take your local reputation very, very seriously. I mean, number 1, your Google review rating and that of Yelp and other services out there dramatically impacts not only how trusted you are by people who are discovering your business, but also in your visibility. For instance, the number 2 algorithmic factor for determining if you rank in a local search in Google, number 1 obviously is proximity. I should say there's 3 that are really important. Number 1 is your business relevant. So if someone's looking for, let's say, an Indian restaurant, and you're not an Indian restaurant, you're not showing up. So number 1, you got to be relevant to what the person's looking for. Number 2, you've got to be in a close proximity, usually within about 5 miles, to have any chance of showing up. Depends on the business, of course. Some businesses, let's say like a big box store, it's going to have much greater radius than, say, something like that Indian restaurant. But proximity is very important. But the third one is your reputation. So even if the business is literally like a block away from the person who's searching, and it is highly relevant to what they're searching for, yet you've got a 2.5 rating in Google, you may not even show up. Google takes this very seriously, and so should you, for obvious reasons, but also for a search engine optimization reason. Let's move on to number 4. Use social media to target and expand your audience. So here you can look for people that are relevant to your business and target them and promote those posts to that audience. So here you can use targeting features within like Facebook or Pinterest to target an audience by demographics or keywords, and you can promote those posts to that audience to try to grow your audience. Number 5, low cost and free tools can make your job so much easier. So, we're going to provide you in a second here a whole list of free or very inexpensive tools to give you what we call a marketing tech stack. These are all of the technology to make your job easier and make you more effective as a marketing. Take advantage of those things. You do not have to spend a ton of money as a local business to use very, very advanced technology. Next item, utilize simple SEO techniques to increase your visibility and relevance. We talked about a number of them here. The one that comes to mind that we talked about earlier is title and meta description. Those should be on every single page of your website, and those should be unique and distinct. You shouldn't have the same, title for every one of your pages. That's a missed opportunity. So whatever your page is about, you want to use your title of that page to clearly describe it. Next is translate your business goals to an analytics game plan, like we talked about. So convert your goals into something you can measure, so you know when you configure your measurement tool like Google Analytics, you know how to configure it. Next is, just remember the analytics can tell you the what, when, and where, but you need to figure out the why. So you got to put your thinking cap on, and you got to look at the data and start to kind of ask yourself the questions. Well, why did this happen, and why didn't that happen? And then put a plan together to figure out how you can make it better. Next is experiment, learn, take chances, have fun. I mean, I cannot stress this enough. Too many people, especially small, medium businesses, are too afraid or too overwhelmed by all of the options to do what they need to do. And so I encourage you to take a chance and don't worry about failure. It will not kill your business to try something that that doesn't have the success you want it. So don't sweat it too much. Trust your instincts. Try some things. If you're bounce some ideas off your friends, but don't let anybody hold you back. Don't let anybody put fear into you, except for a lawyer, obviously. You need to kind of figure out what's going to work for your business. And the people that do that, you'll find these businesses start to develop a personality. You start to understand what their brand stands for. Think about your favorite brands and then say, okay, what is their personality? Why do I like them so much? You want people to have the same feeling about you. So your brand's going to have a personality as well and a voice, and you're going to find that by experimenting. And then lastly here, figure out how to leverage AI before your competition does. We didn't talk about this earlier, but I want to talk about it now. ChatGPT, Google Bard, and all of the other kind of tools and models that are either out there now in the marketplace or have been built since this recording was made are incredibly powerful. And people are, this is a highly disruptive technology. What does highly disruptive mean? It means that some businesses will be put out of business because AI will replace parts of what they do and make them less relevant. But there's also something exciting about this, is that AI will create opportunities. AI will create it will be a new tool to be leveraged by the people who are willing to learn it and willing to learn how to apply it to their business. It can give them a great edge. For instance, you could write blog copy using an AI tool. You could write it in a fourth of the time. You could do keyword research using ChatGPT. You could do competitive analysis. Ask AI to summarize your competitor's website and give you what the value proposition and strengths and weaknesses are of their service offering. It is incredible what these tools can do, and you have to at least understand them and experiment with them to see how you can utilize them for your business. And I'm going to finish this section with an example of that. And let's move on to what I talked about earlier, which is one of the kind of the coolest things in our training here, which is a list of free and low-cost tools and services that you can use. All right, as promised, here are the suggested tools that are free or low-cost options for you. You see them all listed here, and they've got definitions. I recommend that you look for the things that appear relevant to you, go to the websites that are listed there, and just kind of play with them. That's the best way to learn these things. That last one that's listed there is ChatGPT, which if you haven't used it yet, I'm going to recommend that you use it. And in the next slide, we're going to look at something I did with it. All right, so what is ChatGPT? It is an AI model that uses a very large set of content that helps it to kind of know a lot of things, and it also has the ability to kind of understand human language and speak in a way that is understood. It also has a degree of kind of, if you will, computer empathy, meaning that it will try to understand the context of your query or your prompt and try to answer that question as best it can. So there's a couple things that are really to your advantage here. You don't need to kind of guess at how to find something. You can just write it the way you speak, and the technology is very good at understanding what you're trying to get at. So here's an example of how I use that here. And by the way, I want to put a disclaimer on this, and this was brought up on our training course when we did it live, and I thought it was a very good point. Someone in the course said, "Hey, yeah, Eric, this is all interesting technology, but we have to be careful because this technology can tend to not give accurate information about certain things." And that is absolutely true. The way that the technology works, it is prone to what they call it hallucination, but essentially it as it tries to find an answer, it puts words together in a way that may provide a response that is not accurate, or it may just almost make up, or what appears to be making up an answer. And just be aware of that. It's not very good at answering questions that require hard facts. What it is very good at, however, is it is very good at providing, some things to think about around your query, a list of things to ponder, a list of things to dig into. It can provide, procedures to do certain things. But if you ask it, what is who was the greatest president of the United States, it's not going to be able to give you an answer to that, because that's very subjective and it's opinionated and all the rest of it. And so it's very good at kind of helping you understand things at a relatively high level, sometimes even a more detailed level. But I want you to always kind of, apply some common sense and critical thinking to anything you see here. But it's a very, very good starting point as a marketer to do a number of things. So here what we've done is I've asked ChatGPT, and this was using the 3.5 model, how can ChatGPT help small business owners in Burien, Washington be more effective and efficient in growing their sales and profitability? It would be helpful to include some examples of how ChatGPT can help with digital marketing efforts, especially if they're just getting started in marketing their business. So I'm asking the technology to basically tell us how it can help us. And here you see the response. And it is being particular to the area of Burien, Washington, which is kind of cool. So you see, I'm not going to read all of these here, but you can see, I hope you get the point here that this was just a way for me as a marketer to very quickly get some ideas. And then I can think to myself, gosh, that is something I haven't thought about. Let me dig into that deeper. And I can even follow up with a prompt to kind of ask the follow-up question and go a little deeper. And just allow yourself to explore those things and look for things that you can try. Again, you can put anything in these prompts. I can't guarantee you're going to get the best answer ever, but I think oftentimes you'll be surprised at how good and useful the answers are. So for instance, if I was the Indian restaurant that we talked about earlier and I was looking for some keywords, I might say, I have an Indian restaurant in Burien, Washington, and these are the types of specialties that we serve to our patrons, and I'm looking for a list of popular keywords that people would use when looking for a restaurant that served these dishes. That query, written exactly how I just said it off the cuff, could be put into ChatGPT, and you would get a list of very useful keywords that would shorten your time in keyword research to say, okay, these are the things I need to focus on. So that's just one example of how you can use a free or relatively inexpensive tool like ChatGPT for. By the way, Bard, which is a product by Google, has just recently been released. It's also very, very useful. It's also connected to the internet. It can actually look at websites and respond to current events or things going on in real time. And so that's also a tool that I recommend you play with. But this is just one of many tools that you as a small business can utilize to make your business as successful as it can be. So this concludes our session. We covered a lot of ground. As you know, we started with social media, but we also kind of gave you a lot of other tools around that, because any particular channel like social media does not live in a vacuum. It's so important for you to think about your business holistically. Think about all of the touch points that a consumer can interact with your brand and your properties, and ultimately choose to do business with you. So we wish you the very best of luck. We know you're going to do great things. We're so happy that you're part of the Burien business community. And let us know here at Interactivate if we can ever help you. Again, this is Eric Papson on behalf of Sherry and Eric, a duo here at a local business called Interactivate. We're happy to be able to provide this content for you and this help. Take care and have a good one.